Now, perhaps your brain, like mine, obviously, is a jumble of thoughts and ideas. Here to help frame the complex issues of the day and the tasks that lie ahead is journalist Arnie Weissmann, another old friend of mine. Arnie is editor-in-chief of Travel Weekly, as well as the executive vice president and editorial director for its parent company, North Star Travel Group. He is also on the board of the nonprofit Tourism Cares and has been a repeat guest lecturer at Cornell University's School of Hotel Administration. Friends, Arnie Weissmann.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. When I checked in and registered this morning, I think Samantha said, here's your badge, and then started telling me about my panel. I thought she must have me confused with another speaker, and then I realized that I've got the largest panel today, and that's all of you. So we're good. I'm not going to keep you the full 40 minutes. But I hope we do get a chance to have some interaction, some peer-to-peer paneling here before we're finished. And I also just wanted to, one observation, first thing, is I've been speaking at tourism conferences for 30 years, and this is the most gender-balanced stage I have ever seen, and I think it is... There's no coincidence that the pioneer in the area of responsible travel is also female. Thank you, Martha. So I'm going to just give some thoughts, and I apologize to speakers in advance if what I picked out as sort of the thread I want to use to try and tie all this together isn't your main point. It could very well not be. But the hashtag for this conference is Over-Tourism Solutions. So my focus is trying to pull together a number of things that everyone said that together may add up to something I hope is somewhat coherent, but then you're always here to back me up and straighten me out if I'm not. So just from the beginning, as Nori noted at the beginning, over-tourism has many faces. And I think that we also learned that in total, solutions are not one size fits all. As Solani observed, we have to take into account how much is too much. And in other words, the way I thought of it is that the acronym DMO is probably not going to be so much destination marketing organization as destination management organization moving forward. As Martha said, and I think I heard echoes of this throughout the day, that the answer is not to stay home, but to travel smarter. So Albert used Barcelona to remind us how multidimensional the problems of over-tourism can be if left unaddressed. As he pointed out, it's not only resident versus visitor. It can be resident who sees economic benefit versus resident who doesn't, as well as visitor versus visitor competing for available space at attractions and restaurants. And in a complex problem like this, he observed, it requires an integrated solution involving all the stakeholders and can't be solved solely by a tourism department. Prescriptions and preventions, he noted, are more efficient than managing side effects. And to this point, Elizabeth underscored the importance of leadership throughout this whole process, using the positive example of Charleston and the counterexample of negligence in Venice. Dan likewise reinforced the notion that the benefits of proactive management, but he reinforced the notion, not only the notions of benefits of proactive management, but also the importance of enforcement and consequences. And I loved Richard's look back at the successful rollback of the negative consequences of unbridled growth in Grand Canyon River rafting. I mean, it was a while ago, but it does show that there's not necessarily going to be a point of no return, no matter how bad it looks at the moment. So Kevin and Ed, I mean, wow, what a balancing act with the national parks, kind of underscoring once again how different locations require custom-tailored solutions. And Ed really seemed to have accomplished the impossible increasing visitor volume while maintaining visitor satisfaction levels. Well done, Ed. Another important takeaway, I think, from the National Park panel is that it's often necessary to create new standards and that visitors will adjust. It's not necessarily tweaking until you hope to get what you want right. You have to think outside the box. And after lunch, Sarah reminded us of the importance of asking, what do you want, as well as what don't you want? And Evelance reinforced the importance of a master plan, but not just any master plan. I was in Borobudur this summer. I was in Bali this summer. And two things. One, there are billboards throughout the island of Bali against this plan. And the other thing on Borobudur is you can still see it and have a wonderful experience, but just not at sunrise. I saw it at sunset. There were about 20 people there. It was really a very good experience, and I had a good guide who took me level by level and explained just about every bit of sculpture that was on it. Lee showed off that the principles of sustainable travel are not incompatible with operating a large-scale company, as long as there's commitment there. And Andrew illustrated that a well-thought-out and ambitious tourism management plan can not only increase tourism, not only put in place safeguards, but aim to improve and enhance a destination. So if this is successful, Andrew, Jamaica could be a case study of moving destinations from marketing to management. Julie well defined the perfect storm that fuels hypervisitation and also the power of environmental redevelopment. And the mantra, the environment is the economy and the economy is the environment, should become the new travel industry motto. I also liked, by the way, that animated campaign to combat vacation brain. And Maria touched on what could be a template for formulation of an over-tourism solution: regulation, coordination, infrastructure, and communication. That Iceland Academy looks great, by the way. So going with and I think we have a good 7 minutes to solve the rest of the world's problems as regards over-tourism. But what I was thinking we could do with this is really truly a peer-to-peer panel that some of you may be facing some of the issues that were brought to the surface today, but as we were talking about before, it's not one size fits all. So if any of you have any concerns or questions facing destinations you love or are in charge of or work with, I'd love to hear the questions you have, and it may be that someone here in the audience has a solution. So we can start. I think there are microphones around. Boy, the wine is really calling, isn't it? Oh, there's one over here.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again for a wonderful day. I've been thinking about, after hearing all the presentations, what's the tipping point for people to really start mitigating over tourism or thinking about solutions? And I've just been curious to hear from the audience, when did you start doing these things? Has it been over time, or is it something that, one day it's like, okay, we still have to manage it? So I'm just curious, and then as other people share their experiences, how you could recognize those signs a little bit sooner so you're not all of a sudden doing an about face and
I actually
your
have
strategy.
a case history that I think is great, and you've just given me the opportunity to bring it, and then we'll
That's what I'm here for.
open it. And that is that the Office of Tourism in Colorado had a new tourism director 2 years ago, Kathy Ritter. She came in. Over-tourism was not on her or anybody's radar, but being new to the job, she did a sort of listening tour. She ended up listening to, in all, 1,000 people in different focus groups. And the resentment against tourists was there. She didn't know it was there, but it was beginning to bubble up. And so she saw this as a threat to tourism in Colorado and a threat to just the lifestyle that everyone liked there. And she said she was taking a hike, and there was a woman who was just screaming, "Stay on the trail, stay on the trail." She was just getting very frustrated with what was going on. And she said, okay, I don't want to be the person screaming, "Stay on the trail." I don't want it to get to that point. But she ended up working with the North Face and Subaru and I think Patagonia, and also a nonprofit that had some experience in this. And they crafted messaging for both the residents and the potential visitors. To the potential visitors, it was how to be Colo-ready, how to be respectful in the way that you visit Colorado, and what you should be doing when you go from one place to another. She got the associations, the hotel and lodging associations, to distribute this information and send it out in advance as well. And then let the community at large know what she was doing. And so this started 2 years ago, and she did a follow-up sentiment survey, and sentiment towards tourism rose, as did the number of tourists. So in answer to your question, I think one has to be looking for it. One can't wait until the signs are just right in front of your face, because there's a good chance that it could be there just under the surface. And now, having answered the question, does anyone else have other insight into what one can do to identify the signs or take early steps? There's someone.
I think one of the problems we've had, I'm from Charleston, and I work with Dan. I'm the board chair of the Preservation Society of Charleston. One of the problems we have is that there are residents' perceptions, and then there's data. But it's sometimes hard. We haven't identified the data tools to know really exactly how many tourists there are. And there are all sorts of ratios that tourism academics have quoted to me about. If you have 1 tourist per resident, you're close to the tipping point. And in Charleston, we have actually 7 million tourists for a residential population on the peninsula that is less than 100,000. So, but that's just how we're counting it. Savannah counts it a different way. Barcelona may count it a different way. So if anybody has any thoughts about how you get accurate data on what your tourism numbers are, I would love to know it. And if I could just, while I have the mic, make one other comment. This has been really fascinating for me all day, hearing from all of you. The one voice that I would have loved to hear from is the voice of a resident who is actually affected by over-tourism. And I'm one of the, in addition to being a little bit of an activist, I'm one of the residents of Peninsular Charleston who has daily impacts on my life from over-tourism. And I think, with respect, the next time a conference like this is organized, there are a few reasonable residents who are not bearing torches and pitchforks. And if those could be dug up from wherever they are and their voices added to the mix, I think it would enrich the discussion. So thank you.
To your point about data, I was actually just yesterday at a very different sort of conference, and the CEO of Uber was there, as well as the co-founder of Lyft, and the city of New York was represented by Bloomberg Philanthropy, and the CEO of Ford Motor Company were there. And they were talking about a project called Shared Streets, but Uber and Lyft both talked about sharing for free data about movement patterns, and that was being used in New York to identify areas of congestion, but also areas where there are more likely to be accidents. But a lot of the sharing programs, like, it's not really sharing, I think Uber takes the biggest share, but the peer-to-peer sorts of things, because they're getting such reputational damage, Airbnb and Uber, they are happy to share data with governments to sort of show that they're being a partner in this. And I don't know whether you've reached out to them or they're still talking to you, but they have a lot of data. They're very, very data focused. is a
Thank you so much. I'm so privileged to be on this program. I'm from Nepal, and this over-tourism is quite tricky word for us because in Nepal, tourism is one of the main economic resources, and the government is very ambitious to invite tourists. But in our Himalayas, in the Mount Everest, every year there are so many, expedition is going on, and it is high traffic over there. And because of that, there is a lot of pollution, and also the people, local people, we are suffering the climate by climate change. So this is something like for us is somehow is quite advanced, but somehow it is really we have to be aware. So as what I'm thinking, is, something like this kind of program should be, like people should know from our part of the world as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any thoughts particularly on this? I think that would be a great idea to share that sort of thing. Yes. Yes.
Oh, I just have a question. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you, everyone who participated in the conference today. I had an absolutely wonderful time, and I think it was a very thoughtful discussion. My name is Girgana. I'm actually working with DC Urban Adventures. I know that we spoke a lot about the physical ramifications of mass tourism, over tourism, but one of the things that I would really love to hear some perspectives on, specifically in the case of Barcelona, Bali, and now on the cusp of a major decision, Jamaica, the impact of cultural heritage preservation and how the authenticity that was spoken about today can be in danger by having staged culture. So if anyone could speak to that, and because it's, I think, an impact in many different destinations, I would love to hear the insights.
Okay. Yep. I mean, does somebody have a direct response also? Yeah.
I'll get back into this with a response, and that is staged culture is better than no culture. And what I am worried about is that this is not going to stop. And last year, for the first time, I got frightened by one of my own presentations, and I was giving it in Cancun, of all places. But the growth is going to continue, and it is projected to be, we're looking at 3 billion international, a proportionate increase in domestic by 2050. Eventually, it will taper off. But the population is growing, affluence is growing, the technology that facilitates tourism is growing. And I'm afraid that, like it or not, this is going to force some new thinking about how we do travel. And I think we've heard a lot of that today. But a lot of this is mitigation. It's going to work for a while. But it's almost like climate change. We have a climate change in how we handle tourism and how we travel personally. And I would encourage everyone to think in the long term, because short term there are things you can do, but you can guarantee that sooner or later you will be getting more tourists no matter where you are. Short term, I do want to mention something that was brought up at the World Bank yesterday, and that is that you can get a kind of early warning by watching social media and by watching TripAdvisor. If the number of looks in TripAdvisor is going up for your destination, they're coming. And same for the number of references in Instagram. That helps short term. Long term, we need to think about new ways of doing it.
Yeah. So Martha, we're about, Donna, you ready to bring it to a close, or would you like it to?
I think what we decided, because the online didn't work, is that we would just have more discussion from the floor. So I think,
Okay. Well, we can, sure. Okay. Yes, over here.
I'm Cheryl Hargrove. I had the privilege of starting the Heritage Tourism Program at the National Trust for Historic Preservation 25 years ago. and then working with Jonathan and National Geographic at the Center for Sustainable Destinations. And I teach cultural tourism for the University of British Columbia, and one of the biggest issues is both staged culture as well as cultural commodification. One of the things that I think is the solution is that it has to be maker-driven. And so makers decide what culture they want to share, what culture is off limits, and then it is presented in those ways. And so the ownership and the recipients of culture are the ones who are then presenting it. That was certainly in the neighborhoods when working with Cultural Tourism DC, that it was about the neighborhood. It wasn't about gentrification. It was about sharing the neighborhood, sharing the experiences, and getting people into those neighborhoods to learn more, you know, meet the locals. But it has to be driven by those makers. And it is where it's also respecting what those makers present and making sure that they are receiving the benefits. So if you're hiring an artist, they get full pay. And if you're taking advantage in other ways of including them in your packages or promotions, that they are actually dictating what you're going to see and what you're going to do. So.
And one of the best experiences that are rollouts that I've seen on a national scale, and I think we've all the speakers would come together to say that doing things ahead of the problem are the ways to do it, is the country of Bhutan, which requires that a guide be with every visitor. And what this ensures is that it's not only to help them not get lost or take them from place to place, but to ensure that they don't jump in front of a religious ceremony, you know, and take a selfie. And it's all around protecting the culture. And they've always been very, very good at that, at limiting numbers, and then when they expanded numbers, to move it across the calendar as well as the country and opening new areas. I think they are just a model for what one can do to not let the problem start. For some people, of course, it's too late for that. But yes, question in the back, I see.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Someone else has a mic. Yes, go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you. So I'll respond to the last thing in a minute, but just to quickly say that the question asked earlier about the tipping point, I mentioned to David earlier that what I think it is that we finally found a word that captures it all, encapsulates it so well. We've been talking for a very long time about exceeding carrying capacity and excessive congestion in spaces, and so in many ways we're not dealing with a new problem for some spaces, but rather a new terminology that we're addressing in specific ways, theoretically. The last point about the staged authenticity, I think it's very important to point out that that is why we're embarking on the community tourism approach, which is intended to be organic. It is intended to flow very smoothly into how people live daily in their indigenous spaces. What we had a lot of because of our accommodations-driven approach was that we had many all-inclusive properties with, of course, limited time, snapshots of what it would be. And I think we even sometimes incorrectly referred to it as staged authenticity because there's nothing authentic about it. So this is what we're trying to treat with in moving people out of those spaces into the places where people own the activities, own the businesses, own the representations. In fact, they tell you what they think is an important part of the culture to be exposed. They're the ones who are driving it from the idea, from the concept, until it becomes a business, and until it becomes market ready, until it becomes export ready. So it's about getting that chain right and getting it right at the start so that you don't end up with more of the same.
Very good. Okay.
Yes, I wanted to just thank those of you that have been addressing the issue of authenticity in cultural heritage tourism. I think it's a fascinating subject. My name is Andrea Holbrook with Holbrook Travel, and we organize primarily group tours, and that's always a hugely difficult thing to do. And it seems that it's a moving target a lot of the time, and trying to push those boundaries. And I was very intrigued and amazed at, I just came back from Latin America Travel Mart in Argentina, and someone drew me aside and said, "Oh, did you know that Airbnb is now offering experiences?" I said, "No, I really hadn't heard about that." And they said, "Yes, they're actually working with nonprofits and different organizations, civic organizations in the local communities, and basically allowing their system to be a platform for these organizations to offer like tours of organizations as an experience that's being offered. Now, of course, that's setting up competition for me, but I drew my attention. I was like, what an innovative thing to do. I really thought that was a great way, and it sort of speaks to what you were saying about having it be maker-driven. So I think these are sort of new cutting-edge ideas of how to offer these authentic experiences that serve the need of the local community.
Very good. Yes.
I have one from the online community, and unfortunately I think we'll have to start wrapping up shortly after as the reception's ready for you all. But this is a good one that we can ponder, I think, during the reception and our conversations together. Are there recommendations for transitioning from a destination marketing organization to a destination management organization?
Yes, in the corner here.
Thank you. I'm going to take this question because it's the one of the challenges we are facing in Barcelona. I don't think we have to make that split on marketing or management. I think maybe we have to rethink a little bit what we are expecting from marketing. I mean, maybe we have to shift from a demand-oriented marketing to a more macro marketing to induce what we really want to happen at the destination, by acknowledging that we are not going to control everything. But what was happening in Barcelona for many years is that, and in the recent years and still now, and we are trying to manage it, it's this completely non-relation between the marketing and the commercialization and the communication, and then the problems we are facing in streets. So maybe, as I was trying to explain at the very beginning, how can we integrate marketing in a much broader integral approach on management? And by doing so, I'm afraid that's not enough just changing the name or changing the ideas. We have to change also the way how we tackle tourism and the way how we organize inside the governments and the internal coordination of the whole program of developing or strategic or management plan, because it's not, as I've said, as you remarked, and I'm glad you remarked it. I think many of these problems won't be solved. Many of these tourism issue related problems may not solve just solely by tourism policies. So,
yes, Helen?
Hi, Helen Moreno. I think that, actually I was going to just stay quiet because you just summarized my same perspective. You're so brilliant, and I'm just a follower. I'll tweet about it later, okay? I think that at the end of the day, in answer to your question, Destinations International is an organization designed for certification and training, and destination stewardship is at the top of their mark, and they are changing this into being destination management as opposed to marketing, because they recognize they have a more proactive role to play. I started my career too many years ago in Orlando at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and it was with strategic planning. And one of the things that I experienced first in this total sector was I was in the land of plastic, No, I was in the Disneyland and Universal watching an entire destination grow up of the attraction side. And there was the city of Orlando, and there was the traffic increasing, and there were neighborhoods that wanted a piece of the pie. And so they owned it, and this one neighborhood had a real cultural essence and felt left out, and they felt they were something authentic and that could bring that to bear. So they went to the Destination Management Organization at that time, mostly in marketing. They went to the the Agency for Development that was in Orlando, and they went to zoning because it would require bringing buses, or not buses really, they just wanted an exposure and a building up of their area. And so I think it encapsulated what you're saying is that urban planning has to have tourism consideration in it. The tourism marketing conversion to stewardship needs to recognize that they have a responsibility being in the community to help the urban planning and zoning laws be able to be reflective of what's coming down the pike and be as accurate as possible with the measures that are being used and what's being said out about how many are coming and what they're going to do. But more than anything, I really appreciate your comment, Ms. Chairwoman, that we don't talk with the residents enough. And that, to me, is the mantra. It's resident advisory groups. It's putting them on the boards. There are examples of where that's happening. And having that voice heard. And the best example was when you were saying, I think it was in Iceland, where you went out to the community and started, in Tahoe, and started saying out to the community, this is what we're doing now. And the Colorado example, this is what I'm doing so that I'm listening, I'm hearing. And that's the most important part. But I really believe the foundation is in urban planning, and residential and commercial zoning is so disconnected, and that's where I think our best solution is to integrate that effectively.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We need to capture that passion that you have, harness it, and keep the conversation going at the closing reception. Thank you, Arnie. Thank you so much. Arnie captured masterfully the highlights of the day in about 20 to 25 tweetable sentences. That was pretty amazing. And he also managed to take care of the largest panel that we had all day long, and he handled that very, very well. We are leaving that final word to him. All that's left now to do is to thank the many people that were involved in this. I would like to thank our speakers and moderators who initiated dynamic conversations that are sure to continue. Thank you to our sponsors, including Lake Tahoe, Holbrook Travel, World Wildlife Fund, the National Park Service, and the Organization of American States, and to our media partner, Travel Weekly. We also want to thank those many people who labored behind the scenes to make this day possible. Our honorary host committee, whose names are listed on page 1 of your program, and a special thanks to CREST and GW staff, volunteers, and interns. I'd like to call them out by name: Samantha Bray, Rebecca Stewart, Kelsey Frankiel, Emma Louise Sargent, Shelby Luzzi, Kyle Sedlock, Alex Hessinger, Stephanie Westel, Cassandra Lammers, Cheryl Pascal, and Carol Goodstein. And finally, we are very grateful to you, the audience, for joining us today, whether you were with us physically or virtually. A couple of final notes. The Slido platform will continue to be open for comments tonight and tomorrow, so please do submit any examples and case studies and comments and questions that you're probably unable to do today. And please recycle your name tags and programs at the registration desk before joining us across the street at the Lisner Auditorium for finally our closing reception, which is catered by Sunnyside Gourmet and brought to you by generous donations from the OAS, the Organization of American States. And we can also thank Glass House Winery in part for the beverages. Okay, that's a wrap. Thank you so much.